everybody, this is Dave Nasty with NextLevelGuitar.com, and today what we're going to talk about are some sweep arpeggio shapes. Now, what's really cool about these sweep arpeggio shapes, remember arpeggio is notes of a chord played separately, so we're going to learn some really interesting ways to voice our chords as we go through this, but the most important thing to think about is how we're going to break it down with our right hand, and the three common shapes that you'll find with minor arpeggios. That's what we're going to start with. Alright, so everybody, one thing that I would like to mention, if you would like a free video lesson that is not available on YouTube and a coinciding ebook, please click on the link that you see below. Again, it's a free lesson that you won't find here on YouTube and a coinciding ebook. I'm going to work with an A chord. I'm going to do an A minor chord, and we're going to go through the different shapes on the guitar, and then we'll break down the best way to practice this and isolate it so that way you can get the motion of this down quickly. Okay, so the first chord that we're going to do, or the first voicing of the chord we'll outline, is your typical bar chord shape. So now in this position what you have is we have all our variations of A, C's, and E's. That's our basic triad that's going to make up our A minor chord. And quite simply, it just looks like this. We have an A with our index finger on the 5th fret. We have our C with our pinky is what we'll play it with up on the 8th fret. Then we have our E with our 3rd finger. Back to our octave A with our 3rd finger. Then move straight across with your index finger on the 5th fret to cover our G, B, and E strings. That's going to give you your C here, your E here, your A here, and then up here with your pinky, that'll resolve us up on our C. So that gives us this. Right, and that outlines, of course, the basic bar chord shape that you see all the time. So we're going to move right along into another position, and then we'll connect all these guys. The next voicing that we're going to do is a shape that we've actually seen when we practiced this particular arpeggio voicing in conjunction with our scale shapes in the key of G, right? So maybe check back in some further lessons that we've done here today, and you can see how we've also used this diatonically within a key. So sticking to our A minor chord, we're going to do this voicing, and we're going to do this in its arpeggiated shape, right? Arpeggio, of course, is just our notes again played separately. So I'm going to pull off from E to C. I'm going to hit my A, my E, my C, my A, and my E. That gives us this. When we just connect those two shapes together, you get this sound and this movement on the guitar. Alright, so the next chord that we're going to outline, or the next voicing of a chord, I should say, that we're going to arpeggiate, is this A minor bar chord that's rooted with our 5th string on the 12th fret. And this is another tricky one, much like the first one, where we're going to lay our 3rd finger flat to cover more than one string here. So in this case, we're starting with our index finger up on the 12th fret. We have C with our pinky, and then again we're going to go 3rd finger to lay flat and cover our D and G string on the 14th fret, giving us our E and our A note. Middle finger right there on the 2nd string, 13th fret. E, A there with our pinky up on the 17th fret. That gives us this. Alright, so let's talk about how to move this around and make it quicker for you to practice. We're going to start with our second position of A minor, okay? And we're going to focus on just the 3 strings only. So what we'll start with is we're going to start with a downstroke with the right hand, and we're going to pull off from E to C. So with our downstrokes, that gives us this. Then we have an upstroke on our A note and an upstroke on our E note. It's really, really good initially in the beginning to practice just the first 3 strings of your arpeggio shapes before you even try to go into all the notes that will take you, in most cases, to the 5th string, right? Now, what you'll find common, another thing within our arpeggios, a lot of times when people sweep arpeggios, you'll notice you have 2 notes on a high string and 2 notes on a low string in order to get you to switch directions and motions with your right hand. So starting with those first 3 strings, what we're going to do is, like I said, do a downstroke into 2 upstrokes. So really slowly, you get this. Down, up, down, up, up. I must really urge you to focus on playing evenly when you work through all your techniques, but particularly when you're working on sweep picking. It can be, it's kind of like you have a tendency you want to drag it a little bit quick. So sometimes your notes will rush together and won't stay at an even tempo, right? And that's something that you want to avoid. So it's important, of course, just to start really slowly with it. And that gives you this. Okay, so another thing that you can do then, once you become more comfortable with working in just a single upstroke motion, is now incorporate going back in a downward motion and still isolating just these three groups of strings. So what that's going to give me then, real importantly, we start with a downstroke, up, up, continuing back up to your A note on the B string, you're going to have a down, then you have a C note with your index finger, that's a down as well. Now we're going to continue to cycle the arpeggio, but we started with an up, or we started with a down, now we're going to continue with an up, I should say. So you have this. So again, let's point out what our right hand is doing. Before, when we were talking about alternate picking, we had pulled our first finger in and kind of bent our thumb to cross or plane across the strings. When I play this, I have my pick placed so it is a bit more flat in surface area as it crosses the string. It gives you a bit more tone as you go through the arpeggio because you can get a little bit more of the surface area of the pick. But more importantly, it'll just become very comfortable to drag in either direction. So again, like I said, we start with a downstroke. Up, up, down, down, up. Right? So we can get fancy with this down the line, but initially what you want to do is just isolate those top three strings, and you can do this in every single position of the arpeggio. So again, let's connect these guys, and we'll talk about how we can maybe practice one arpeggio position into the next. So when we connect them, again, we have our first one. Alright, again, when you connect your arpeggio shapes, you get this movement. Again, it's important to just start with the top three strings, then you can get into the lower strings within the voicing of the arpeggio, and you just start really simply with one, and then work on another one, and work on another one. You have three basic shapes that you cover, and that way it's not inundating and it's very simple to practice. So the ones that I like to play in this particular shape are the ones that extend off of this voicing or this bar chord voicing. This one is really easy to get going and move quickly. So starting with my top three strings on that one, executed the exact same way, where I start with my downstroke on my high E, into my upstroke on my C, upstroke on my A, and then back into my downstroke, back into my downstroke, and an upstroke to continue the motion. Right? A really, really simplified way to break down the general motion of these arpeggios. Again, when you go through the entire arpeggio shape, very important to practice it with your metronome. You can play it in quarter note time, you can play it in eighth note time, but don't rush the motion. Start very, very slowly with it. So let's connect these arpeggio shapes and play them a little bit more up to speed so we can get some tonality here out of what this sounds like. So initially we have. Alright, and when you speed that up, you get this. Right? A really cool thing to do is you can mix this higher arpeggio, pull off from A to E, slide down to C, pull off from C, or E to C rather, and start the arpeggio shape. Right? Again, when you move that around quickly, you get this. Hey, this is Dave Nassy with NextLevelGuitar.com. We have just covered our 3 very common minor shapes that we do with our sweep arpeggios. Stay tuned for future lessons. We'll cover our major shapes and some other fun techniques that you'll see in today's playing.